Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. One of our patriots, Thomas, asked us to look at a link. It's a Wikileaks that just came out. It's entitled Pope's Private Letter Reveals Early Involvement in Power Struggle. When you open up that link, there are a lot of different documents that you've gone through for us. Well, John asked if you would look through everything and then give us the view of what this document is that we're looking at. And for those who want to review them, I have the link in the description box below.
Well, Betsy, this is significant. Thank you, John, for sending it in and, adding to your team of just amazing people who give us the coolest things to read. I didn't see that anywhere, and so it's great for these things to be brought to our attention. So I've ran this by a number of people, and this is what we think. There are basically 4 major points here. First point, 5 points.
Can you give a summary of what is in there first for people who haven't seen it yet?
Well, yes. What's in there is what we predicted while it was happening, even before it was happening, and after it was happening, and we've written articles, intelligence reports on it. But there's we couldn't figure out until you see the attachments and the letters particularly. And then when you see the letters, you can actually see what's really going on, because in a few of those letters are something that's rather earth-shattering. Now, Wikileaks wouldn't have put it out if it wasn't something rather shocking. Now, this is going to take framing for people to understand who the sovereign military order of the Knights of Malta, well, they're just called the Knights of Malta, let's call them that. And they literally do live on the island of Malta, and they also have a sovereign piece of land right near the Vatican, and it's a sovereign state, a sovereign nation. So the Knights of Malta are a sovereign nation, and they have their head, and their head is Matthew Festing, and he is, I forget, some relative of the Queen England. And it holds a very powerful position, because all the people who are members of the Knights of Malta, and you're usually almost exclusively invited to be a member of the Knights of Malta. And that's only if you are extraordinarily rich, or you're a monarch, or you're an ex-monarch, so they call it the white nobility, the black nobility, or the richest people in the world. It doesn't matter what your religion is. And once you join this insider trading group, they basically are a front for a charity. And so money gets moved around all the time, but that money goes to the Vatican Bank. And it doesn't really go to charity. Go ahead and try to find the charitable work of the Knights of Malta. That's a big joke. But these people dress up and they get in their regalia and they take vows of fealty. The Queen of England has taken a vow of fealty to the Pope through the head of the Knights of Malta, which, as I say, I think was her cousin or some distant relative. And so literally you have monarchs taking a vow to the Pope. Well, that was okay as long as it was just some, secular dude, Matthew Festing, the head of the Knights of Malta. It was okay, but here's what happened. The Pope, because he's a Jesuit.
Oh, and by the way, I did say to the conclave, I said, hey, I need a Jesuit to look at this. Do we have any former Jesuits in the conclave? And that's why we wound up with you.
Stuck with me again.
And that's important, because I've always felt that in the end, it would take a Jesuit to take another Jesuit to task.
What I'm about to tell you sounds as if it's insanity, and yes, only someone who's been on the inside could stand and tell you this story with a straight face, because it's absurd. The Roman Catholic Church has a group around the Pope called the Curia, and they are usually Franciscans or Dominicans, and they fight back and forth to see who's going to be the priests and cardinals in many cases who tell the Pope whether what he says is really 100% true, because he's supposed to, when he writes an encyclical at least, or when he writes certain things, he is supposed to be speaking directly for the divine and for the Catholic Church in toto. And so these group of scholars are around him, and anytime the Pope writes anything, it has to go through this group in general. Not these things that this Pope Francis gives out every Sunday, which are absolutely, they're block-busting, bunker-busting bombs every Sunday since he has come to power. This Pope Francis has acted as he is the king of the world, emperor of the world, or higher than that. That would be Pope of the world. Yes, that's right. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the Jesuits, who are a militant organization created by Ignatius of Loyola, and they take extreme vows to do whatever the Pope needs, including war, and which includes killing, and includes subterfuge and espionage and subversion, and whatever the Pope needs, that's what the Jesuits did. But they were very militant, and we could go into great detail about that. But the point is that even to this very day, they take an extra vow, and the vow is to the Pope through the Black Pope, or through what the Superior General of the Society of Jesus. The Society of Jesus are the Jesuits. The Superior General is the head of the Jesuits, and because they wear black robes, he is called the Black Pope. So you have the White Pope, Francis, and all the popes are white. They like to wear white. And then you have the Black Pope, which is the head of the Jesuits. Now, never before in history did the Jesuits take over the Curia. 100%, all Jesuits. And now we have a Jesuit Pope. And then that Jesuit Pope, as we predicted, would take his good buddy from Venezuela, Pope Arturo Sosa, whatever his last name is, Abascal or whatever. Anyway, the head of the Jesuits, the Jesuit Superior General, Father or Superior General Arturo Sosa, he was the right-hand man to Pope Francis in South America, in Venezuela, and because of their actions, and also in many other countries in South America, thousands of people died. And this is well known. And somehow after they elect a Pope, Benedict, Ratzinger, who was a former Nazi stormtrooper, then they elect a Pope who is literally known for being part of thousands of people dying because of him turning traitor on them and working directly with Father Arturo. So Father Arturo is put in charge of the Jesuits. So now you have a Jesuit white Pope and his direct right-hand man, his number one lieutenant, as the head of the Jesuits. And the only thing left to be complete in that would be what we predicted would happen. And in our intelligence reports, we predicted that would happen. We'd also predicted some things we're going to talk about now, which is that this Pope, if you really want to call him that, Pope Francis, took over the Knights of Malta. He came and he made some big deal about the Chancellor of Knights of Malta sending condoms out to Africa and Asia. And so that really wasn't the issue. And so they fired that chancellor. And so then the Pope intervened with this perfect opportunity and made the head of the Knights of Malta, who is one of the most powerful people on the face of the earth. There are very few that can be compared. Matthew Festing, or the head of the Knights of Malta, is one of the most powerful people in the world, more so than monarchs, more so than maybe even the Queen of England. So he puts someone else, and he puts in a cardinal, his good buddy, Cardinal Burke, who has been in the news, is very corrupt with the Vatican Bank and with other things. And, this present Pope ignores everybody's sins. Matter of fact, when the big thing happened in America and all the Jesuits were ready to say, we're going to turn in the names of all of the Jesuits who were the pedophiles, and 20 of their names from the East Coast and all the cases, what happens? Francis says, nope. I'm putting a gag order on all of you. We're not even going to talk about pedophilia until our next meeting of such and such and so and so. And at that point, I'll tell you what I'm going to say. In other words, and then during this time, which nobody's getting prosecuted, he gets mad if you mention pedophilia. But this man is a murderer. I'm sorry to have to say it if you have never heard this before. Francis is a murderer. And he's a conscious murderer because he's into open borders. Open borders can only happen Well, open borders basically invite the death of a lot of people that he calls migrants, but he doesn't really ever serve. But he does collect a bounty on each one of their heads. So this Pope Francis, who is a Jesuit, who's surrounded by a curia of Jesuits, and has his best Jesuit friend, the head of the Jesuits, has just put another person, his best buddy, in charge of the Knights of Malta. Now that completes the trinity of the Jesuit takeover of the Catholic Church, which we predicted would happen, and we also predicted that would be the end of the Catholic Church. And basically the Catholic Church, as it is now, is just a hollow-sounding bell without a clangor. And he has basically rewritten every doctrine, every dogma. We complained about this as it happened. We've written the documents to show you that we're not making this up, Francis. So Francis has basically defied anything that he wanted to defy and support anything he wanted to support in absolute, I was going to say contradistinction, but in some cases he agrees with church doctrine, but then he goes overboard with it. He rewrote the Our Father. He rewrote the words attributed to Jesus Christ. He said that Jesus Christ was the exact same being as Muhammad, and who was the other one? Moses and Krishna, all the same being. This man is a nutcase, but he is not a nutcase in ruling the world with hegemony. He has already been invited to come to Astana, Kazakhstan, to head up this kind of Muslim World Council of Churches that the president of Kazakhstan, being so filthy rich with oil money, has built. And he said he would go there in 2017, but he did not because Donald Trump was elected, or else we predicted that would be the end of the Catholic Church as we know it. Because he has gutted it in every way. He's bled it to death, and he's a vampire. But now the news is that it wasn't about condoms that the chancellor of the Knights of Malta got fired. It was about what happened as soon as Cardinal Burke was put in charge of the Knights of Malta.
Now this is where we go into the WikiLeaks, is
yes.
Correct? So we did a little background, and I just wanted to say the articles that you've mentioned, I'll have those inside the link so people can go back and see. There is one thing, though. We had always thought that the white pope and the black pope would merge together in one person, Pope Francis, and we got that out on the internet really early. We believed that it was that truth that was spread around the world that kept him from making that in-your-face move.
Yes, because we predicted that he would take over personally the Knights of Malta if he was brave enough and if he wanted to become, instead of the white pope, somewhere in between the white and black pope, which is the gray pope. But now he put his best friend in charge of being the black pope, and he put his second best friend in charge of being the Knights of Malta. So it's basically the same thing. So he's in charge of all three. So in bending our words a little bit, I'd have to say still he is the gray pope, and he is really nasty. And the reason that WikiLeaks brought out this, make sure that at the bottom of the article you click on those other articles. It gives you a perspective, and then make sure to read the attachments, from which are the WikiLeaks attachments. They are specifically letters that they did not want to get out, letters from the Knights of Malta. Now, those letters demonstrate and prove exactly what I say. They take the richest people's money in the world and put them in trusts. And then they manage those trusts through the Vatican Bank and through other banks. And basically they're an insider group. So when Matthew Festing, and he would of course know who when the heads of the Knights of Malta is talking with people, he's talking with the richest people in the world. And they control entire nations. And so when they're about to do something, they tell the insider groups, and then those insider groups are able to tell some of the Knights of Malta that they wish to tell, depending upon your level of participation in your charity, in the trusts that you give over to the Knights of Malta and the bank, the Vatican Bank, to take care of. So in these letters are two things. The first thing is, Francis told Cardinal Burke when he took over the Knights of Malta to get rid of all the Freemasons. Okay, that's a joke. at least half of them, maybe 3/4 of them, are Freemasons, because they're into all of these groups, these secret societies. And the Freemasons were not friends of the Catholics in the past, but now it's not the way that it used to be. So if he says get rid of the Freemasons, that is absolutely ridiculous, because the Jesuits rewrote the Freemasonic rites so that Jews and others could come into what was an underground Christian organization that was in contradistinction to the papal see, to the Pope. Well, the Jesuits won the battle with the Knights of Malta, who became the Knights of the Hospitallers, who became the Knights of Malta. So Malta and Jesuits, no, they didn't like each other in the end. But now the Jesuits have dealt the final blow to the Knights of Malta, who hold the tradition of the Knights of Templars and the Knights of the Hospitallers rolled into one. That's money and charity. But they really don't do any charity. So Hospitallers are the charity. The Knights of Templars were the money of the Crusades and later, which created the towns and the cities of Europe. And basically created then the finance of Europe, all except for usury. And when you get into usury and fiat currency and hard currency, then you get into the fact that only the Jews could do that. And so there were what were called the court Jew, who would be able to loan money with usury, with having to pay interest on it. And so when you look at this, it was a complete mess. So they created the Knights of Malta to handle the insider trading that was going on with the richest people in the world, including the living monarchs of the world. Look, you can't get the whole list of who's in the Knights of Malta, but when you see their list that you can find anywhere on the internet, it'll blow your mind. And I know this because I was actually asked by some very rich people to look into the Knights of Malta, because they were Jewish and they were being asked to join what looks to be a Catholic organization and take vows of fealty to a man who takes vows to the Pope. And they thought that was crazy. But when we told them, after we researched it thoroughly, who they really are and what they're doing, you'd be crazy not to join this group. You can get a telephone call at 2 a.m. in the morning and then, change your stock market buy for the next day and be much richer by the afternoon. These are the people who control the world. This isn't an exaggeration.
So do these WikiLeaks confirm this with you?
The WikiLeaks show that Freemasonry was being asked to be kicked out. And the third thing are letters from the Knights of Malta showing how they manipulated trusts. And when Francis found out that the real money of the Knights of Malta are in these trusts, because here's how it works. This worked for my grandmother. She was very wealthy, but at the end she gave her money to the Catholic Church. We didn't know that. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew she'd signed papers to do that. So these trusts are to hold these rich people's money so that they get great returns. But if they die, they have to already give, as part of these trusts, they have to give certain huge percentages to the to the Knights of Malta, Vatican Bank, Catholic Church. 25%.
But wait a minute, you could be doing a Ponzi scheme on top of this.
And then when they die, they keep it all. Now, I don't understand all this trust stuff, so as I'm reading it, I'm going, wow. And then I found out from people who know, you can do anything with the trust, especially if you're not in America. So these trusts are written upon like Vatican laws, like so archaic, you might as well call them canon law. I mean, they're like basically say, we get anything we want. Now, here's the weird thing. And this is what the letters show. Francis became so desperate lately, probably because Trump stopped the refugee flow and he stopped the bombing of Obama. And we didn't go into World War III, so there'd be even more refugees. And that's where the Catholic Church makes its big money. So when the Pope didn't get his money, the Pope was on the ropes. The Pope came to the end of his rope. The Pope, who they really want to give a rope to, because there are people in the Catholic Church who just want to kick him out so bad, they just don't know what to do with this crazy man.
And I know you want me to make a thumbnail with a Pope on a rope, but I can't because YouTube will take it down, so I'm going to have to stick with the kiddies.
Yeah, oh, totally.
Okay, sorry.
And the Pope is on the ropes because he is taking a beating, except he's not going to jump out and be refreshed, because here's what's really going on. He's so desperate that he invented new rules for the trusts and the management of those trusts for the Knights of Malta, who handle the money of the richest people in the world.
How did he do it?
He just added a tax. He added a 60% basically carrying fee that is paid up front for the life of the trust, as well as the 25% that you may have to give 25 to the Catholic Church and 25 to the Knights of Malta upon your death. There's also ways that they can manipulate that money, just as you say. There's the Ponzi scheme. There's the money that's flowing in and out. There's the money they say they own and don't own.
Yes.
Who owns that money? Who knows? Who knows the trust? You can't look into the trust. Holy moly! And it's written on the paper. These are papers, letters from the Pope, and letters from the Knights of Malta that never meant to get out, that show the way that they basically are, what do you call this? They're called economic predators. They're much like a George Soros, but they're using the Catholic Church and their fact that they don't have to pay taxes, and you can give money to them as a charity, as a write-off through the Knights of Malta, and that charity doesn't go to anywhere except into, as you say, some type of weird charity Ponzi scheme.
Hey, look, and you're confessing your sins and whatever else to these pedophile priests who prey on you to get your trust money. I mean, they have a feeder system right there.
And it's almost as if it's expected if you're a certain type of a person. For instance, if you're a black monarch, in other words, a monarch that no longer sits on a seat but just holds a tutelary position. And yes, I did say that properly. That is just a figurehead, right? No. Those people could literally come back to power, don't forget that. And secondly, they have the divine right of kings and or queens, which means they're connected to the divine. The three estates in Britain where the monarchy is still, it has a spider web, and the biggest Shelob, the biggest predator spider in the world is the British monarchy, and its web is just absolutely amazing. And so when you're talking about the monarchy, the three estates were as follows. The first estate was called Lords Spiritual. Second estate, Lords Temporal. Third estate, commoners. Lords Spiritual. Do not forget that the first and second estate of the French were merged into one with King Henry VIII, because when he became the head of his own church and the monarch of his own country and expanding, he merged the first and second state into one. And then when the Rothschilds, working for that same merged first and second estate, took over the fourth estate of Reuters, the biggest news network in the world, was bought by the biggest manipulative bankers in the world, it shows you that that is the way that it really works. We're talking about the Vatican has been doing this for centuries and centuries. You could literally almost say millennia. Now, this is a huge release because it doesn't just show the crookedness, which we could have imagined, but it shows the desperateness of Francis.
Okay, so everybody's going to say in the comment box, oh my gosh, you got to get this information to Trump and blah, blah, blah. So if POTUS was here with you, what kind of specific tactical information would you give him so that, and then tell him what you would want the goal to be?
Well, I know that Trump is in our schoolhouse here, and he does listen, or at least he has somebody taking notes for him, because we see this all the time. And so the intelligence agencies need to go back to school, and it's really a schoolhouse they need to go back to. They need to go back to learning about the basics. So if you, Mr. Trump, as you full well know, I'm patting you on the back. You're the only person in the world that's ever brought China to its knees, and they're going to be shining your boots, as I predicted soon. And I did not predict this, even though Joseph Mifsud, being a Vatican agent for the Knights of Malta, we did recently predict and show that it was Stefan Rowe, who is your Russian spy, that you really need to get because he gave the Brits the money they need. And he is of course, Knight of Malta also. And Joseph Mifsud, Knight of Malta. So,
And
Mr.
so is
President,
Robert Mueller.
and Robert Mueller is definitely an agent of the Knights of
Oh,
Malta.
an agent, yes.
And Mr. President, you're tall. I don't know if I can pat you on the back well enough to say thank you for doing what you're doing. You are busting up the black monarchy, the white monarchy, the Knights of Malta. That's been impossible for anybody. Only the Jesuits, as I've just described, penetrating the Knights of Malta, have done this before. But now the Jesuits get there, and what do they get? For 500 years, they've been trying to get the Knights of Malta's wealth. The leftover, what they imagine is the leftover wealth of the Templars. What did they get? Nothing. It's just like, who cares that somebody was part of the Bilderberger or the Trilaterals or the Club of Rome or the Knights of Malta? They're all dead. That's why Francis is so desperate. So I'm patting you on the back and saying, keep doing what you're doing. No more group deals on anything between countries. No more treaties between any more than bilateral deals. No more trade deals that are not simply bilateral. It is the ethics of the person leading that country. You can't build commerce based upon ideologies. No.
Well, he knows that.
And so I'm saying you're doing the right thing, and what you've done with the Knights of Malta.
Well, what can he do with the Pope now? So the Pope gets there, and basically the coffers are empty? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the Jesuits get there, the coffers are empty.
Oh my gosh, there's nothing in there. Just like Venezuela's trying to get its gold back from the Bank of England. Did you see that? And, did we tell you about those shipping costs?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's nothing there. A big nothing burger again.
Well, the nothing burger is that the Knights of Malta are now a nothing burger, and they're some almost sacred monarchical blood lineage leadership of the Knights of Malta was flushed down the toilet by a greedy Jesuit pope, the Grey Pope, who is sheltering Benedict, who is the criminal who said that he'd take upon himself all of the crimes of those working in his corporation called the Catholic Church and all of their pedophilia crimes. Okay, and then what happens? Not another word. He's hiding out. This Pope won't even address it. This Pope only addresses what he wants, which is open borders, apocalyptic theology, and liberation theology, and basically being George Soros's. I mean, he's basically thrown all of his chips in with George Soros and the Chinese, because that's where he thought Francis thought it was going. And then he thought that he'd get a hold of the Muslim world by going to Astana, to Kazakhstan, and taking over this place where the UN probably will go, because we're going to kick the UN out of the United States.
And a lot of good Catholics out there, they don't like this Pope, and they are trying to take him down. So is there anything here for them? What do they have to run with here?
Well, all you have to do is just write down his words. Just listen to his weekly sermons.
I'm talking about
it's blasphemy.
In the Wikileaks. Is there anything for them in those Wikileaks?
Well, the common Catholic can still, if you have a good priest, have the same experience of the search for the Holy Grail every time you go to church, because the Eucharist is a reenactment of that. And if you have a pure soul, a pious soul, you have a pious priest, it's the same exact spiritual experience that goes all the way back to the Last Supper. Now, can the current priests who are living in sin do that? No. As a matter of fact, their masses are the opposite of a white mass. You might call them a gray mass. In some cases, when they're living in horrible sin, you could call them a black mass. And I don't get into just mentioning the pedophilia alone. If that doesn't show you that the Catholic Church doesn't deserve tax-free status, nothing ever will. Nothing could be worse than that. And what we are shown is only the tip of the iceberg, of course. And remember, $4.5 billion have been paid out already in America to keep these things out of court, with no priest that I know of ever going to jail. And that is, as I say, the tip of the iceberg, because then the rest of the priests started giving out the real names. Now, these names are from the 50s and 60s, some in the 70s, and so they're still hiding all their current pedophiles. Closed down the Catholic Church as a tax-free exempt organization in America.
Oh, that would really
tax them
bad.
for their land, and
Yes.
they will close overnight. And that's what needs to happen. If they can't stand on their own 2 feet, then they can't stand it all. And that would be true for any organization, any church that is found to be doing immoral acts as basically a monopoly, as a racketeering. This is a racketeering
or
gig.
Promoting violence.
And then they get the money, billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, over time trillions of dollars, for refugees coming into this country that then are lost. It looks as if it's human trafficking if you look closely. And so you can see that the Catholic Church is 184 front groups that funnel the money back to them for the refugees, is where the Pope gets his money. So the Pope is very desperate at this moment. He doesn't get to go to Astana. Hillary doesn't come to power. There's no Third World War apocalyptic theology in Damascus. He doesn't become the king of the world.
The Mahdi isn't coming.
The Mahdi's not coming, as we know. The Messiah is not coming yet, guys. And the fields of Armageddon, no, they're being turned into, genie oil fields where Halliburton and Dick Cheney and Rupert Murdoch and one of the Rothschilds and a few other people are gaining their money.
And Trump's tweet today that there's no caliphate. That's it. It's gone.
And if there was a caliphate, he would bomb it. And so when they said they found new land of ISIS, he's going to bomb it. He's going to want to know why you didn't bomb it already. How dare you show me these pictures without showing me it being bombed? I gave you an order. Bomb ISIS to death. That's what he said it. He said, kill every single ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Just bomb them. Kill them all. So
thank you, John. That was a very interesting link. Is that what you'd like to say?
I just want to say that it links up with what we just revealed about Joseph Mifsud, who's now missing. And one of the real, of course, we've mentioned about 11 of them, one of the real Russian meddlers in the 2016 election, and the way that Joseph Mifsud is connected to him and the way they are connected to the Link Campus University in Rome, and the way that is a front for the CIA. And that's where they, along with Michael Gaeta, the FBI counterintelligence representative in Rome, and the embassy, that's where they entrapped Papadopoulos. That's where they entrap a lot of people.
Well, like we were saying, it's not just the Brits that were behind the overthrow of Trump. It's also the Vatican, because he is going to cut down on their revenue stream.
So you see there, through the Knights of Malta and its influence, that Cardinal Burke was able to use Joseph Mifsud and one of his members, Stephen Rowe, to try to take down Trump. It's just that they just did a very bad job. And I'm telling you, really, really bad job. Because remember, for 8 years, they got to act with impunity. They got to do whatever they want because that's what Obama did. Obama just killed people left and right, millions of people. No one ever questioned him because, the race card would be pulled up. He rewrote immigration and allowed who knows how many millions of immigrants he invited in. He is Angela Merkel of America. He started these caravans because of his catch and release policies, on and on and on. I could go on and on. But the point is that's all been changed. And that has disturbed the flow of money worldwide. And not the money that is currency, because that's the stuff they try to steal. That's the flow. It's the old money that they're after with the Knights of Malta. It's the offshore accounts. What do you do with all that money when you got all that money and you want to make money with it, but you can't even admit that you stole it or that you keep it in an offshore account? What are you going to do? Go to the Catholic Church. Act like you're giving it to a charity. You get to slush that around so thick, and the Catholic Church will write you a receipt for anything you want to give, because the Knights of Malta, nobody even gets to know about what they do. I mean, go ahead, I dare you. Try to find out about the Knights of Malta. Good luck on that one, especially any charitable works they do, about their banks. Go ahead, try to look up the Vatican Bank. See how far you get. No, these organizations have been occulted. They have been secret for hundreds of years. And because of some of the insanity of Francis, who comes out and acts like he is going... he's done horrible things to the Vatican Bank and disturbed the way that money flowed so bad because he's just a jerk. I'm sorry to have to say it. He couldn't even keep up the old ways of the Catholic Church. No. And making sure that the mafia is protected. No. He had to mess up the Vatican Bank. I don't want to get into that, but now he's trying to correct it. And so I would have to say to Trump, you are doing a great job, Mr. President, and I am honored to give commentary on these historic events. I'm honored to be alive during this time and to witness this, because never before in history have we ever seen a white pope turn gray, let alone black. And that's what we have going on here. Thank you, WikiLeaks.